lessons. Several years ago, I hope you can hear me in the back. Chris gave her dad a book. It's called A Father's Legacy, and the subtitle is A Lasting Heritage for Your Children. Well, I didn't think he was writing in it what with his Parkinson's, but he did. He wrote in it, and I just found it. So, I chose a few paragraphs, not too much, but enough so you could get a feel for the kind of person that Ted was. You really shouldn't be crying. Okay. Page 25. He got that far. Page 25 asks the writer, you know, the person who wrote the book gives you a little suggestion of what you can write about on that page. And so the author says, recall 5 of the most important lessons you have learned in life. Ted wrote 6. Number 1, trust God in all ways. That really surprised me, but not much. Number 2, always treat people with respect. Number 3, save for the future. Number 4, remind you, this is going to the grandchildren too, right?
Yeah.
Number 4, lying makes a thing worse. Number 5, give everything in a good marriage.
Wow.
You will then receive far more than you could ever take from the marriage. Number 6, reaching your goal is possible if you want it. So, then I kept turning pages and found the journal asked the writer, when did you become a Christian? How did your life change? And Ted wrote, it wasn't until I was far from home at Lackland Air Force Base in Texas, going through aviation cadet basic training, when I felt that God was close. Christ was part of my life, and I was not and never could be alone.
Amen.
Training was hard, driving and intense, 24 hours a day, 6 days a week. Sunday was a respite. Church was a refuge. There in church was real life with God's presence. With this, I could put up with almost anything during training. Then comes the interesting part. The journal asks the writer, describe the most memorable Valentine you ever received. And who sent it? And Ted wrote, there were many. But then he put ... all from my best friend and favorite wife. He retrieved himself.
Got out of that one.
Some of you know that I have been consoling myself by rereading our old love letters. The ones we wrote while we were going to different colleges 56 years ago. The last paragraph of Ted's last letter to me from Michigan University before we were married reads like a message to me today. Ooh. Pages here. Ted wrote this to me just before he came home to New Jersey from college to be married. He wrote, time is going by so fast. Soon we will be old. This is the reality, man. Life will be fun, real, and deep. I love you, I do, See you soon. Love, Ted. Today, 56 years later, time has gone by fast. We did get old. And life has been fun and real and deep. Thank you, God, for a blessed married life. Thank you, Ted, for a wonderful life with you. I love you. See you soon.
Hi, you guys.
Hi.
Can you see me?
Yes.
I'm Chris, his daughter, his favorite daughter. But he always said that, so that was pretty cool. Around Christmas time, I felt like the most important gift I could give to Dad was a letter. Because, you know, things wilt and mold and so forth, but words hold true. And anyway, so I wrote Dad a letter. One of the things that was important to Dad was that he did well as a father. He grew up in a hard situation with some, his parents had some mental illness and some alcoholism. And that was very important to him, to be a good dad and a good husband. And he worked hard at it. And so here's my letter to Dad. Dear Dad, Merry Christmas. This is this last Christmas. I wanted to write you a letter to let you know that you have been a great dad. If your goal was to do fathering well, you've done it. From the time I was little, you would come into the room, look up, and explain, the spider in the corner is our friend. Then I found out that you really didn't like spiders. I remember riding on your shoulders as a little girl. And you stood next to me and watched lightning outside our home in New Jersey. You said not to be afraid, that it was a fantastic show that we should enjoy. I remember as a little girl interrupting what you were doing at the table or desk, and you would stop what you were doing, give me eye contact, and listen. What a great dad. That made me feel that I was important to you. You shared your love of classical music and of singing. I love that you and I shared the classic Cabrillo. That was his idea. I was still in high school. And learned the German Requiem. Wow. Your bass voice is wonderful. He would take me out to dinner I think it was Tuesday night, and then we'd go to practice. It's pretty cool. I also rode on the back of his motorcycle down to class at high school. And that was interesting. You learn to trust. You've shared your, okay, I've got that. Oh, you've shared your love of photography, and you've always been my go-to guy when I had questions about Photoshop. And of course, you have always called me your favorite daughter, even though I'm your only daughter. I have never heard you speak ill of any person. You have always tried to have a positive attitude, even through years of Parkinson's and now cancer. I've watched you buy thoughtful gifts for Mom for Christmas and birthdays, and I have received thoughtful gifts from you also. 2 gifts of great price and great thoughtfulness came to mind. The sailboat for my graduation from college, and the digital camera when it was out of my range financially for me to buy. You've been fun and funny. You make people laugh. It was not at all out of character for you to wear big false ears to your hearing aid appointments. Your intelligence and sense of humor have been a wonderful combination, making people smile and brightening their day. You've been generous with your time and money. I remember you and Mom teaching English. That really impressed me as a little girl. They taught English to those who didn't speak English. They volunteered. And many times you have sold a car or trailer for far less than it was worth, or given something of value away to someone who really needs it and really appreciated it. I know you've given blood and we're in the Gallon Club. I don't know anyone else who's done that. Even though you don't speak often of Jesus, your generosity, honesty, and the value you place on the people around you speaks louder than words. I've overheard an occasional, God damn it. Is that allowed here? But I think the Lord overlooked this when you slammed your thumb with a hammer. He would come to the dinner table and he'd have a black thumb and we'd say, Dad, what did you do? Slam my thumb again. I close this by saying, I love you and I've been privileged to be your daughter. I felt cared for and loved back. You've been a human being that has made a very positive mark in this world. When you go to heaven, we will miss you greatly, but we will see you very soon because time is very short in heaven between here and there. We will all soon be with you, and until then, we will enjoy you here. Merry Christmas. I love you muchly, your favorite daughter, Christy.
Wow. I'm incredibly impressed and thankful for all of you being here. As I tried to write something to summarize my father's life in a few words, I kept coming back to him helping. Everything about his life was helping other people. Helping make the world prettier through his photography, through tuning pianos so they sounded better, and singing in the choir. He was helping, as has been mentioned, as the handyman in the neighborhood. He helped our family see the beauty of the world in nature, taking us to parks and camping and hiking, and he was a scuba diver and a snorkeler, and even tried hang gliding, tandem hang gliding. I think he was about 60 when he did that. Mom and he went kayaking throughout the Caribbean when he was in his 70s. He was helping me. He helped me find a career. He took me to Lawrence Berkeley Labs, rented me time on a teletype, on a computer, a mainframe, bought me a book on BASIC and said, here we go. 30 years later in Silicon Valley, I retired from there. It was, he pointed me in the right direction. It was good. He edited the Parkinson's newsletter. He was helping where he could there. He was helping people see life differently. So the guy who would go skiing, when I was a teenager, he and I would go skiing. And he's wearing these lace-up mountaineering boots. This was 20 years after people went to plastic ski boots. He's wearing these leather lace-up mountaineering boots to go skiing. And because that was him. That's what he loved to do. He skied from the time he was a kid. And he was very good. 2 years ago, after 14, 15 years of Parkinson's, he went down to the DMV and renewed his motorcycle license. And they gave it to him. My wonderful father couldn't walk in a straight line at that point, but the DMV saw fit to give him a motorcycle license, renew his motorcycle license. He wanted to get a scooter, but we convinced him that probably wasn't really a good idea anymore, but he wanted to. He wanted to go ride again, because he rode motorcycles all his life. He taught me. He and Uncle Fred taught me to ride. Everything about his life was helping. And in spite of this, just a couple of months ago, he was worried that he hadn't done enough. He was worried, what do I have to show for my time? And Dad, you are a loving husband. You're a wonderful father and an adoring, nurturing grandfather. That's what you leave behind. Dad, you will be missed.
No, I'm not gonna repeat what I said. About 3 weeks before Dad passed, we invited the grandkids all to come together and to spend some time with Dad. And the timing was beautiful. Dad was still alert and awake and able to interact with us and so forth. And we had to tell him, Dad, use the walker, go, anyway, or the wheelchair, whatever it is we were using at that time. He played his harmonica, he did all sorts of things. But the kids came from all sorts of places. My daughter is in Ireland, working with YWAM as a missionary. My son and his wife came from Delaware. My other son came from San Diego. So we are representing them by what they have sent for us to speak. And so this is from my daughter in Ireland. So this is Robin's Remembrances. This is from my daughter. You know, and she's 28 now. You know those people in your life who know your potential and call it out long before you could have ever been aware of it? Those people who refuse to let you be less than all you were meant to be? That was my grandpa. During most of our visits, the question would come, what do you want to be when you grow up? I had every non-answer you could think of, but he already knew. He pointed it out long before I could appreciate it. You would be a great teacher. You would be an excellent writer. I wrote him off back then. I was probably 10, but he was right. I'm still growing into all he saw in me way back then. He never would let up on me because of all he saw in me. One of my most vivid, crystal clear memories I have of him was a time when I was swimming in their pool. Grandpa was sitting on the side trying to read the paper. I was being a complete goofball, my 7-year-old self full of the foolish antics that accompany that age, and my silliness caught his attention. From then on, the name of the game that afternoon was, how can I get Grandpa to laugh? The best feeling in the world was knowing that Grandpa was watching me and delighting in me. I've never stopped wanting to make him proud. I'm grateful for the part he played in the delightful pair I called my grandparents. They traveled all over the world. I hitched my first plane ride 11 hours to Germany with them when I was 14. I'm grateful for car rides where they would drive for hours to meet our mom to pick us up, Grandma and Grandpa singing together, frequently off-key, in the front seat. We're not going to get into who was off-key. Love you, Mom. I'm actually,
Oops.
I can't find my place now. Okay. I'm grateful for the man who always caught me reading in the dark. Turn a light on, you'll ruin your eyes. I think I heard that phrase from him more than anything growing up. You'd think I would turn on a light. I'm grateful for the big, mean grandpa trying to get us crazy youngsters to quiet down and go to sleep when my brothers and I were spending the week at their house. I remember lying in bed talking to my brothers. We all shared a big upstairs room at their house when we stayed with them. And we would yak away until we heard footsteps. Grandpa was coming. I'm grateful for the solid familiarity of classic music that will always spell Grandpa for me. Every time you walk into the house, there was that sound. He appreciated and studied music like no one I've ever met. He loved to give to us, his grandchildren, his gifts. We were always knowledge, always trying to expand our minds, help us to understand this world we're part of. I'm grateful, so grateful for the endless trips to Monterey Bay Aquarium, Dennis the Menace Park, and ice cream. We went on that same trip, I don't know how many times, and it never got old. We were spoiled and beloved grandchildren for sure. I'm grateful for my introduction to the Big Dipper and 1,000 fun summers spent at the beach, because that's where my grandparents lived. It was such a full life, and I coming in at the tail end of it, got to benefit from this life well lived. It is quite a heritage to live up to. My life was made richer because of this man. I'll become more and more aware of it the older I get, I'm sure. I'm so grateful for all the time I spent with him and Grandma. His last days were maybe my favorite, just because they were such a gift. I was across the world and wasn't sure if I would ever get the chance to see him again, but there he was, so different, but still Grandpa. He had his harmonica out and wanted to sing, and we got to enjoy the gift of him one last time. I cried like a baby on the bus, leaving him and Grandma for the last time. It was the worst feeling, letting go of them. Part of me hates how life keeps moving us on, but that's what life is, an endless series of goodbyes and hellos. And my grandpa knew how to make each hello so precious. He knew how to hug. When we would visit as kids, we would get the biggest hugs from Grandpa on arriving at the front door. There was nothing like a grandpa hug. Nothing like having those strong arms wrapped around you like they were never going to let you go. We had to say goodbye to him, but I know that hello, followed by a massive grandpa hug, when we get to heaven will be well worth the wait. I miss you, Grandpa. I'm a reflection of your strength of mind and character. I live because you did, and we won't forget you. It won't be long till we see you again. I would not be the woman I am today without him.
Chris had more kids, and I'll be reading Danny and Peter's letters that they wrote because they couldn't be here. So from Dad's grandson Dan, my nephew. My grandfather, from the time I was young, was one of my heroes. He taught my siblings and me the values of patience, humility, and respect. Not only did he teach us, but he showed us each day how to embody those values in how he lived. He would always welcome us with a bear hug and take us out to explore the beach, to canoe around Huntington Lake when we were camping, or help instill a sense of wonder while exploring new things and ideas at the aquarium and the exploratorium. Laughter was evident in his eyes, and he loved to tell a joke or a story, to pass on some advice in hopes we would find a good path for our own lives. Through education and experience, through taking the time to enjoy each moment. Most importantly, that success has many measures, and one of the sweetest and most rewarding is family. He was a leader through humility, an artist in his photography, and a grandfather I always hoped to make proud. I can say without a doubt that his steadfast character helped to shape me into who I am today. That was Dan. Peter. Ted Louv was a lot of things to a lot of people. To me, he was the world's greatest grandfather, with the keychain to prove it. It's tough to describe the sum total of Grandpa's impact on my life in a few sentences. From taking me on an overseas adventure to helping me through college. I thought I'd share a few of the snapshots that everybody could relate to and that I'll always cherish. Grandpa was a provider. His breakfasts were world famous. I'll always remember waking to the thunder of classical music in the morning and a booming, "Good morning, welcome to the land of the living," from Grandpa cooking cackleberries in the kitchen. I think that would be eggs, yeah. Grandpa was my mentor. He taught me to drive stick shift. You'll never see a man with more patience as his clutch was being slowly destroyed. He had had a cheerful outlook until the very end. His favorite adjective was delight. They were a delight. He was a delight. What a delight. Grandpa loved words. He loved poetry. You were never sure if he was babbling incoherently or just quoting his favorite poet, Ogden Nash. He loved playing with words. He used to say to us grandkids, "I'll turn you into a side street." It wasn't until years later that I got the joke. We'll leave you with a fitting poem from his favorite poet. I Didn't Go to Church Today by Ogden Nash. I didn't go to church today. I trust the Lord to understand. The surf was swirling, blue and white, the children swirling on the sand. He knows how brief my stay, how brief this spell of summer weather. He knows when I am said and done, we'll have plenty of time together. And with that, I think that's the family's remembrances. If we have anyone who would like to share something, please do. You can come up here if you like. You can stand in place if it's more difficult, or if it's more easy, if it's whatever you want to do. Lisa. The first of my ex-wives.
The first time I met Ted and Barbara, we were going down to Santa Cruz, and Dawn said, "Hey, let's go meet my folks." Okay, no warning. Meeting the boyfriend's parents. I'm wearing like cruddy jeans and probably an offensive t-shirt. Absolute nervous wreck. I walk into the house, and Ted gives Dawn a hug, and he introduces me, and he just wraps me up in this hug, and I went, okay, this is gonna be all right. And I felt really special, and then I realized he does that to everyone. That was it. I mean, that's with Ted. You met him, he hugged you, you were family. And that also gave him the right to interfere in your life for the rest of your life, which is so lovely. You've heard about his famous breakfasts. What you haven't heard is they started at 7 o'clock in the morning, and they involved every pot and pan in the house being thrown against the wall. So you come grumbling out going, hi. And he was so disgustingly cheerful in the morning. I haven't had coffee, I haven't had a shower, I haven't had food. Hi, how are you? Oh God, I love you, but just tone it down. But my favorite story about him is a private joke that he and I had that I don't think Dawn and Barbara know. We were all in England together. And we went to this little English village with the unfortunate name of Cockermouth. Cockermouth.
In the Lancashire.
Yeah. So we were walking, Ted and I were walking along, and we passed this little house that had this huge pig in it. It was like the size of a Mazda, this big black and white pig. And Ted looks over and goes, "Now that's a fine pig." And for some reason that just cracked me up. And so for the rest of the trip, whenever we saw something like, "Isn't that a beautiful house?" I would say, "Yes, that's a fine pig." And that was our running joke forever. We always, when something was really great, it was a fine pig. So I mean this in the most loving way. Ted, you are a fine pig.
With me. So wow, this is a lot of people, you weren't kidding. And I'm really not good at speaking in front of big groups of people, but Ted was such a huge part of my life. Our families, through Barbara, actually go back 4 generations now.
Yeah.
And it's kind of amazing. And y'all moved to New Jersey when I was 9 years old, and then my mom started bringing us out here when I was 15. And we came and stayed at your house. and Ted made breakfast. I still make Ted's cereal to this day. I just can't get my son to eat oatmeal, but I still try and make it all the time. And I would get up in the morning early, and your dad was awake, and he'd say, "Why don't you go pick some strawberries? I'm making making my famous cereal." And I'd go out to the garden and I'd pick strawberries, and I realized this was like the most magical place I'd ever been to in the world. And on that trip, I was 15 years old, we were leaving, and I was on the airplane and I was crying. And my mom said, "What's wrong?" And I said, "I don't want to leave California. I need to live there someday because it's this magical place." And I think your home was what made it this magical place. And Ted created that home. And I live in California now. I've been here almost 20 years, and you guys are my family here, you know, and I will miss him a lot. So, but I will continue to make Ted syrup.
Thank you.
Thank you, Robin.
Well, the last time I've been this far up in church was when I got married 50 years ago. Anyway, I jotted down a few notes this morning about Ted. I've only known Ted for maybe 10 years. I've always thought of him as a very gracious, gentle, respectful guy. It's just an interesting guy, knows a lot about a lot of topics. About a year and a half ago, Barbara decided to organize a neighborhood group of old-timers because Ted was becoming less mobile. And I was invited to join that group. I think because my son lives in a neighborhood and he's too young to be called an old-timer. So twice a month we had meetings at Ted's house, Ted and Barbara's house. Barbara would go off and teach in Watsonville, and about 8 of us would gather for a 2-hour get-together, chit-chat, and wonderful times. And the group is becoming much and much closer as time goes by. A lot of us were strangers to each other in the beginning. In the beginning, Ted tried to steer that group to a more intellectual theme. He was not successful. We were right back to catching gophers and fixing cars and all that stuff. So, but every time you came into Ted's place, you felt really good. He really knew how to say hello and made you feel very welcome. Anyway, as time went by, Ted's style never changed. He never complained. He was visibly very uncomfortable at times, and he was the same Ted the whole time, all the way up to the very end, about a few weeks before he passed away. So last year, about a year ago, Ted bought a scooter, a little red 4-wheeled scooter, electric scooter. And Ted and I went to Moss Landing for lunch, and we brought the scooter. We took his car, and I drove it, and we brought the scooter and had a nice lunch. He endured, after lunch, walking around Moss Landing looking at some rusty metal, just to make me happy. And then we found the scooter, took it out of the car, and thought we would take a ride along the waterfront there in Moss Landing. So for a little stroll. Well, I didn't know, but Ted likes speed. And he likes acceleration and freedom. And I spent about a half an hour chasing him. And he also could fake deafness. I was begging him to slow down, but he just never did. Anyway, I was very happy to see that scooter get loaded back into the car. We're going to miss Ted, and he's gone, but he's not gone away. I see him all the time, and I think of him all the time.
Thank you.
Can you hear me? I don't talk very loud. I have Parkinson's disease, and I took over as editor of the newsletter from Ted. And I tell you, he was not a good, in the Parkinson's group, he was only good for, he's a great person. The person who said that was David Donahoe, who also has passed away. And he was a great person. I'll tell you a funny story. Barbara and Ted were shopping at Costco one day, saw them together. Later on I said, Barbara by herself, I said, where's Ted? I had to put him out in the car, he's buying everything. and so I was thinking, am I speaking loud enough? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. And so he trained me. He was very positive, and what a great person. That's all I have to say.
I'd like to say a short word from here, because I don't have a walker to get up to. But I would say I can add a different perspective to everything that has been said and enjoyed, and that is that I came to Bonnie Doon in the same year that Ted came to Bonnie Doon. And we had a lot in common with our past, with aviation, with military, loved to sing in the bass choir. And all I can say that I would add to anything anybody else has always said, to me, Ted was my big brother. 4 years older than me. I escaped from LA in a very bad frame of mind. I can say that Ted did a lot to help me become a Bonnie Dooner, and maybe a little vice versa too. We were very much involved with the church, the school, the fire team, the Bonnie Doon Ecological Reserve, and yes, even the ladies' club. I have a little bit of humor from Ted rubbed off on me. Anyway, I'm thankful that he was there, and all I can say positively is that he had a skill and a technique that I picked up and learned and used on others, and that was, he never answered my questions. He only gave me a counter question. Well, what would you do if? I think that was our upbringing as engineers and lab and test people. What would you do? Well, if we do this, if we try that, what'll happen if it doesn't work? I don't hear that from his family and friends so far, so I thought I would offer that.
I'm always so impressed when people can get through this without tears, so forgive me if I can't, it's just in my nature. But I wanted to share, I had the good fortune to move in next door to Barbara and Ted 15 years ago. And it was my first time moving to the country, and I had no idea how to do anything. So he really was Mr. Fix-It for me. He was my go-to neighbor. I'd call Barbara, Ted, tell me my water's out, my electric's out, what do I do? And Ted also taught me how to use my first chainsaw. And he was a very good teacher. And he also, for me, Barbara had made a beautiful quilt from this photograph over here of Ted's. And I fell in love with it, and I just thought, oh, that's so amazing. And so I said, I want to do something like that. And I had this photograph that my cousin had made. And so I took it to Ted, and I said, can you put this on fabric for me? And so he did. And then Barbara and Ted kept asking me, have you quilted again? I said, no, no, no. And then one day I went over there, and Barbara presented me with a quilt that she had made and said, here, this is for you. We know you're never going to get yours done. I did finally get it done, and it is hanging up in my cabin up in Tahoe. And I'm very proud of it, and I absolutely cherish the ones that they gave me. The third thing I just wanted to mention, Barbara and Ted had my daughter and I over for dinner. not too long after I moved in, and my daughter was at that time, just met her first boyfriend. And I remember saying to her, this is the kind of marriage that you should be looking for. Barbara and Ted, they share each other spiritually. They're both artists in their own right and respect each other's art and work. And they clearly love each other and they make each other laugh. This is what you should look for in a marriage. Thank you.
Well, I'll try and say a few words. We probably, it may be the longest that we know, over 50 years we've known. And from New Jersey. And when we were the first ones to come out to California. As we came out to California, you followed. And it was great. You lived in San Jose for a little while. And all of a sudden you told us something about moving to a place called Bonnie Doon. We says, Bonnie Doon, you moving to Scotland? But anyhow, we came over and we had some great times then clearing the property.
Yes.
We'll always remember Ted and you guys clearing the property. I told Ted I love to use chainsaws, and I remember that story. And he said, and I said, yeah, I had experience. I cut down a tree at home in New Jersey, and it fell on the house. He said, don't worry about it, there's no house up here. But he didn't tell me that there's a big difference in California versus New Jersey. New Jersey has a lot of poison ivy. Poison oak is a little different up here. I didn't realize when he had the chainsaw and we're cutting these big trunks, which I thought were trees, they were poison oak. My wife and I both came down with poison oak. She came out with all over here carrying logs. And it's okay, for every one day that we helped you guys, it took 2 to 3 weeks. But I can always remember Ted just saying, that's part of living in the country. We'll both miss Ted very much, but we're not going to miss you.
I've known Ted, or Uncle Ted as I've always called him. He's been my godfather. So he was my dad's best friend. Excuse me. Step back. He was our dad's best friend from Denhamfly. And I was probably 17, 18 when they moved to California, to Los Gatos, or San Jose, where we were. So I remember, you know, and when I was little, whenever Uncle Ted was on leave, he always brought giant lollipops. You know, back when we were still in New Jersey and at Cupsaw Lake and in Englewood still, he always would. I remember when they went back for your wedding in 61. You were a baby.
I don't remember.
So I've known him my whole life, and I will miss him as much as we haven't been as apart as I would have liked to, but I will miss him.
Excellent, thank you.
I remember the first time I've ever met you guys. You guys were at Boys Town, and we came in with chocolate lollipops. And I just remember connecting with Don and Chris. Of course, I always called you Donnie because that's what you went by. And, doing the lollipops. And just remembering the secret door in the kitchen that went downstairs, upstairs. You had like this little secret door. For us, it was secret because in California, we don't have basements. So it was just, this tire swing in the front yard. For some reason, I just remember your Morristown house and just remember all the love and support, and loved hearing the stories of Uncle Ted coming and helping my parents build their house in Cupsaw. And just, riding the bikes and shooting guns and just hearing the stories of when your parents were children and teenagers, going, I can't get in trouble if I do that because you did it. So you guys have just been such a major part of our family.
Good.
And as I was sitting there, I was thinking that my parents are with their best friend now. And I think that is something that would be enjoyable for my parents. Don't know about Ted.
He was our best man.
He was your best man. Uncle Ted was supposed to be their best man, but he couldn't get leave.
That's why he's my godfather.
So anyway, we love all of you, and we will miss him dearly, and he will always have a special place in our hearts.
Thank you.
I'm a city boy. What I do. And so we needed to fix it, man. And Ted came over, and it was a plumbing task. And as everyone knows, plumbing tasks often turn diabolical, right? And so, I was there, and then I had to leave, and Ted comes over, and what a charming fellow, right? And he's working on this and didn't really know at the time. When I came back to that house, many hours later, here's Ted, just putting the last thing. He says, oh, and he says, yeah, it turns out I had to go down to the store 3 times to find the different fittings for this thing. And what was remarkable was he was so calm and, graceful. I think what defines us is grace under tribulation, and he had it in spades, right? So that was Ted.
Say something. My husband, Jerry Pittman here, and me, Susie, met Ted through Ladies Club, through Barbara. And I must say that he was the greatest help for our Ladies Club, doing the rosters and advising us on matters of that kind. And he did have this good sense of humor that everybody brought out. And I would like to say on behalf of Ladies Club that we are very, very thankful to Ted. And we will always, always cherish his memory. On the other hand, my husband, Jerry, also met Ted through Ladies Club there, and then we became good friends, and he would always join us for our 4th of July parties, and we enjoyed having him there. And Barbara and he even brought their granddaughter Sarah one time, and it was a nice delight that she could sing the Star Spangled Banner because we are always having the 4th of July party in honor of the veterans. Jerry is a Purple Heart member, and so he really likes to gather his old veterans around him on that special day. So we personally enjoyed his friendship there too, and we always be thankful for it.
I moved into Bonnie Doon in '81, and I'm right next to Barbara and Ted. And I had an acre of land, a 5-year-old son, a bunch of trees, and a dilapidated trailer. And out through the woods comes Ted with a hose and electric cord. He says, you're gonna need power and water. That's the kind of guy he was, and he's been the best neighbor ever since.
Come on up.
Like many of us here, the other 7 or so, I'm a member of what what Ted called me down on once. And that was, Ted corrected me when I told him that, you know, we 8 guys had got together due to Barbara's wonderful foresight and bringing groups of people at his age to talk about things they were interested in. And I told them that I referred to this as the Old Farts Club. And of course Ted replied, I prefer to call it the Old Boys Club. But Ted had a very wide range of knowledge and sense of humor too. And at one of our meetings I was telling people how something that an English teacher had said to me back in 1938 or so. He had us memorize some parts of John Milton's writing. Now John wrote in the style of 1633, so his words were composed quite differently. And I was saying that the one passage that really stuck with me was, but let my dew feet never fail to walk the studious cloisters pale. And Ted, of course, was very widely read and surprised me by coming up with something appropriate. And he said, well, he said, the way I remember it, he said, is that wine and beer can do more to bring God to man than anything written by John Milton can.
It's so nice to see all you here in our little Bonnie Doon church, and we have a tradition that when there's no seats left, the little kids in the congregation will come sit up here. That's why my wife and I practice that today. And so it's wonderful. But I just want to say, on behalf of Barbara and beautiful family, you know, Ted reminded me so much of my own dad. My dad was a war veteran, and he was an orphan. He had a tough time growing up, but he was determined he was going to give his family everything. And you know, I think the world would be so much better off if we wrote stories and made films about people like Ted and people like my dad, rather than all this, I was going to say rude word, that we hear from the media today, you know. Here's a man that did his duty when he had to, loved his family completely and utterly, and there's nobody who'll say a bad word about this man. Those are the people that are great people in our world. These are greatness, not Napoleon, who killed 2,000 of his own men, none of that. These are the great people in the world. These are the people we need to live up. And I know that his memory will live with you forever. And he graced our church and our fellowship here. And we thank God and we thank you, Barbara, and the beautiful family you have. Thank you, Ted.
I have one sweet little thing, service that he did for me. It was just very sweet. Through Sherry, we had a hospice care program here at church for a while, and it happened to be during the time when I was taking care of my mother. She was on hospice, and we had some lovely volunteers come through that program. But one day, Ted came down to the house and took these beautiful pictures of my mother and I together, and me caring for my mother.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just such a sweet memory. No one ever thought to do that, and it's such a great record. And it was for Jordan House supposedly, but it's just such a gift, and I'm just very grateful, touched by that.
Thank you.
Unless there is anyone else, if you would all like to come back and join us at the house for lunch, we'll go from here. If you,
We have,
most of you know.
we have one song that has been requested. By the way, Don has inherited some of his father's generosity. I hate to tell a story on you. Don has at times given his father some really wonderful photography equipment. And then Ted passed that equipment on to my middle son. And my middle son was in Cabrillo at the time. And he currently is a working graphic artist. You know, your dad did just the right thing at the right time for him. And it began with your generosity to him. So thank you, Don. A very appropriate hymn from what we have heard is Great is Thy Faithfulness.